Welcome. Thank you for coming, joining me for this evening webinar. We're going to be talking about some unexpected ways to save money by growing. And I left that open because it's not all in your garden. So, I'm Amanda. I will be leading the webinar tonight. Living Roots Eco Design is my small business. I help people learn how to do gardening Florida style. I grew up in Michigan in the Midwest on a farm and moved to Florida for college. So I've been here for about 20 years, and it is very different here growing than it was in northern Michigan. I mean, everything, what we grow, when we grow it, how we pick it, what we do with it, it's all just very different. And it's also urban, and I was used to a very rural, very different environment. So I graduated from college and I became an elementary school teacher. And one of the things that I did as an elementary school teacher was I ran our school garden. Wasn't the best school garden. We had no volunteers or very few volunteers and very limited resources. But I realized with that garden that a lot of people, both children and the adult volunteers, didn't really know how to grow things. That was really foreign to them. And so after I became a parent, I was like, okay, this is very important. So let me see what I can do. So I've been gardening my whole life. I grew up on a farm, and we always had a huge garden, huge orchards. We preserved everything. We bought very few groceries from the grocery store because it was so far away and it really didn't have fresh produce. And to be completely honest, it still doesn't really have a lot of fresh produce, especially in the wintertime. So we did that out of necessity, and it was a really important thing to me looking back, because I realized the skills that I have are so important to share with my own child, and I'm really fortunate to be able to share that with you tonight. So tonight's topic is about saving money with your grocery bill. And we all know that eating healthy does cost a little bit more. Healthy food does cost a little bit more than junk food. And if you're buying just the basic groceries, not any fancy gourmet type, just basic fruits, vegetables, meats, grains, dairy, your healthy diet costs about $1.50 more per person per day. And so if you have a family of 4, that's $6 more per day that will cost you. And it's a small price to pay for your health, right? But that budget is, in most families, it's tight, and you want to do what you can to save money. And that's only a very basic diet. That number doesn't include anything fancy. So if you're like me, you're a bit of a foodie, and you like to eat fancy food, I would love to be able to eat gourmet meals every night. That means I have to cook them usually, and I also have to then clean up after them. So that's a little bit of work. But being able to have those specialty ingredients, those fancy drinks, having these things on hand makes those fancy dinners, or even a very simple meal that you add a few special things to, it's really a lot easier, and it's a lot more budget friendly. So tonight, that's what we're going to talk about. This is actually what we're not going to be talking about. So we're not going to be talking about toiling in the garden on our hands and knees working up an annual vegetable garden. We're not actually going to be talking about growing vegetables at all. So these things are unexpected ways that you might save money in the grocery store. We all know that we could grow kale or lettuce or tomatoes and save money if what we've planted is successful. And that's the key, if what we've planted is successful. I'm going to share with you some things that you can grow that will be successful, that are very easy to grow, that are those fancier foods, those extras that really add a lot to your grocery bill. And it's a lot easier to grow than the annual vegetables that this gardener here is planting. So we're going to start out by talking about herbs. Herbs are great because they offer so many benefits. Besides for making your food fancy, they are really easy to grow for the most part. They're really good for you. And when you cook with herbs, you can use less salt in your cooking, which is really good for you. And a lot of them will boost your immune system. And my absolute favorite part is you can grow them and you don't really have to pay attention to them other than basic care, water, give them a little bit of compost or mulch or something here and there. But they just grow. You don't have to worry about them a whole lot because you harvest them as you need them. In fact, many of them are perennial. I have a lot of perennial herbs in my yard that I kind of forget about until I need them. I have a rosemary hedge, for example. It's perennial, and it's a beautiful plant. It's a beautiful hedge. And I only think about it when I'm like, oh, I want some rosemary, and then I run outside and I get some. It doesn't require special care like a tomato plant does. And they have a lot of health benefits as well. So we're going to start out talking about culinary herbs. These are cooking herbs, herbs that you'd add to your cooking meals, you could use it as a garnish, you could add it in, you could make sauces with it. I was looking at a recipe for chimichurri today. It used a whole bunch of green herbs or pesto. And besides for adding flavor, it's full of nutrients and antioxidants. And they really add a lot to just a very simple meal, like scrambled eggs, for example. If you throw a couple different herbs in there, cut them up, and serve it like that with just the herbs, that plain omelet or whatever, it goes from just simple to fancy and gourmet with just 5 or 6 herbs. And if you're hiding food, like hiding vegetables in your family's food, this is a great way to sneak in some more greens. I will toss a few of my kale leaves in there and say, oh, it's just basil. And I sneak a little bit of greens into our food that way, and nobody's the wiser. And as a bonus, in that picture right there, that's actually a picture of some dill that has flowered. And I've circled 2 things. One is a type of wasp that benefits the garden. And then the other one, those little tiny green spots, if you could see them, those I believe are aphids. They were tiny. I didn't get that super close. In fact, I didn't even see them until I was enlarging the picture. But aphids absolutely love dill flowers, and aphids are a favorite food of ladybugs. So a lot of herbs, especially the flowers on the herbs, they actually attract beneficial insects. And you want that because the beneficial insects eat the pest insects. So it helps to establish that natural predator-prey relationship in your garden, which means you'll have fewer pest problems to deal with for all of your garden because it is attracting the bugs that you need to eat the bugs you don't want. So let's talk about savings. I bought a little package of cut herbs at the grocery store recently. It was about $4 for, I believe it was cilantro. And I used about half of it, and then the other half ended up in the compost because I didn't have a need for that whole pack. And I was kind of sad, but it is what it is. But it was $4. I could have bought a plant for that amount and planted it. Now, I shouldn't have used cilantro as an example. That is not going to grow super well easily right now. That's more of a cold weather plant. But in the picture right there, this is just a little picture of my backyard. You see there's a gigantic rosemary plant up against the house. It looks kind of like an evergreen tree. That is one rosemary plant. I don't remember watering it past getting it established. I watered maybe for 4 months after I planted it. I prune off the branches as I need to eat them. And the big tall grassy plant in front of it, or next to it to the left, that is lemongrass. Lemongrass grows really, really easily here. And then right in front of that lemongrass on the ground, that's an herb called dotted horsemint. It's actually a Florida native, and it's in the oregano and thyme family. So these herbs are just growing. They're part of my landscape. And they're fresh, they're ready. I don't need to go out there and really do a whole lot to take care of them other than maybe water some of them occasionally. And the things that I'm avoiding, plastic packaging, the energy use with shipping, they're coming from how far away. And when you buy something, are you ever really sure what's on it? I know exactly what is on these herbs that I'm growing in my yard. And I really like that reassurance. I like knowing what I'm eating. And I also like knowing that it's there and it's available. I'm busy, and sometimes meal planning is the last thing I think about. So I don't always have the groceries that I need in my kitchen to make the meals I want. So having these available on hand to just toss into any dish is a lifesaver sometimes. Besides for cooking with herbs, you can also make tea. And I don't know about you, but I drink a lot of tea. Hot tea, iced tea, lukewarm tea, whatever. I drink a lot of it because it's healthy, it's no calorie, and it's something that doesn't usually have caffeine in it. And I'm a coffee drinker, so I need something to offset that balance. So the picture there with the purple flowers, those are actually freshly harvested blue butterfly pea vine flowers. They're edible flowers, and they're what makes that purple tea. It's actually blue, and then you put the lemon or citrus in it, and the acid turns it purple. And it's really tasty. And I can make my own blends with my tea. I like lemongrass, blue butterfly pea tea, for example. That's one of my favorites, and it's also one of my child's favorites because then he gets to squeeze the little oranges in there that you see, and it's his little science project. Ta-da! And he's all excited, and then he drinks the tea. You can use herbal teas with fresh herbs. You can dry the herbs, and you can even take your favorite tea bag or tea from the store, loose tea, and add your home herbs to it. So for example, I don't grow chamomile at my house. I really like chamomile tea, but sometimes I like to add other things to it to dress it up a little bit. And it's fun to try to create your own blends. I'm into lemongrass and mint and ginger right now. I don't know, I like that flavor. And then one of my absolute favorite things to do is I have an abundance of herbs, and they actually thrive on pruning. A lot of them really do well when you prune them. So I prune them, I take those cuttings into the house, I dry them, and then I put them in jars. And sometimes I just have some dried herbs or dried tea on hand for my own needs, and then sometimes I will give them as gifts to people. When I was a teacher one year, I made little repurposed herb jars from herbs from the store, little glass jars, and I filled them up with dried rosemary, and I put a little label on them, a cute label, and I gave them out to a bunch of people that I didn't really know very well at school. And but I kind of felt obligated to give them a gift because they were really, really doing a lot of work to help me. And that was just a small personal gift that didn't cost me a dime, but they really appreciated it. And I really liked hearing the different recipes or what do I do with it? And then they would try it and tell me their reaction. Oh, so good. We tried it with chicken and or whatever. So that's something nice that you can do with it. So I broke down just on average how much you might spend. And I kind of lowballed it a little bit. How much you might spend if you drink 2 cups of tea a day. So if you drink 2 cups of tea a day, that's 730 cups a year. About 20 tea bags come in a box. And they range in price from $3 all the way up. I saw $10. That's some expensive tea. And it's a lot cheaper when you make it at home. So if you're only making it at home, that would be on the low end about 150 bucks. Now, if you're going to a restaurant or a drive-through and you're getting tea there, whoa, that can really get expensive. And even just one cup of fancy tea out is about $260 a year. So if you're making tea at home, it's cheaper than buying it out, obviously, just like anything. But also, if you're growing some plants, you can reduce that budget. And it's something it's really easy to grow. A lot of these plants don't take a whole lot of work because they are what we call in the plant world perennials. That means that they live for several years. You don't have to replant them every couple months like lettuce or kale or tomatoes. Those plants are called annuals, meaning they live only for one growing season or maybe 1 year, and sometimes maybe a little bit longer here in Florida. But for the most part, they have a short lifespan. A perennial plant has a longer lifespan. They'll live for several years. And we're so fortunate in Florida that we can have those plants growing. Most of them will grow 12 months out of the year. So we're not limited to the summer growing season like you are where there's snow. And you can actually just add these plants right into your landscaping. So I have there a bundle of lemongrass. That's just a couple stalks that I cut down from one of my plants, and I wrapped them up. I washed them and wrapped them up, and there you have it. I actually made about 1.5 gallons of lemongrass tea with that amount of lemongrass. It's my child's favorite thing to drink. He will drink that all day long. He likes it instead of water. He doesn't really drink a lot of water, and then that's causing him some other issues. So as kind of an alternative to juice, which he would drink all day, we drink lemongrass tea. And he doesn't even ask for honey or any sweetener at all. It's just a lemongrass tea. The picture down there with orange flowers, that is just a flower pot that I have with some ornamental flowers. They're not edible at all. And then right there in the front of that pot, I have some thyme. It's just growing, it's hanging out, it's a ground cover. So I just stuck it in there. There was extra room in that pot. So I just put an herb plant in there. Why not? Now, one important thing I'd like to note, I do have this plant in with non-edibles. If you are a new gardener and you're not sure what the plants look like, I would avoid doing this. I would not mix edibles and non-edibles so closely together unless you're familiar with them and you're labeling them, because I don't want anybody to get mixed up with food and not food plants. And then the photo on the bottom right, that is a native edible that's in the mint family, and it gets beautiful flowers on it called calamintha. And you can make tea with that, or you can use it in your cooking. So I have put together just a snippet of a list of different tea plants that you can grow here. And a lot of these are things that you might buy in a box with to make tea with from the store: hibiscus, lemon balm, different types of mints, blue butterfly plea vine, that's actually in the picture there, along with the cranberry hibiscus, lemongrass, ginger, turmeric, Yaupon holly. This is a neat one. Yaupon holly looks just like a boxwood shrub. So it's a common landscaping plant, look-alike. So a lot of landscape designers actually who are trying to use native plants will use the Yaupon holly instead of the boxwood. And it is actually the most caffeinated plant in North America, and we happen to have it native to our area. I'd like to point out that the berries are poisonous, so don't eat the berries. The dwarf variety does not get berries, so if that's something you're concerned about, you could get the dwarf variety, and that will stay short. Mulberry leaves are actually used in tea, and that's a tree here that grows very well. Tulsi, also known as holy basil, that isn't annual, but it reseeds. So I did include it on this list of plants because it will come back from the seeds. It's absolutely delicious and very pretty. Passion vine, the fruit and the leaves are both used in tea. Rosemary. Lemon and orange. Citrus is a common ingredient in tea, and those both grow here well, I shouldn't say very well, they grow. Citrus greening is causing some problems with citrus trees. So if you already have a citrus tree, great. If you don't, they don't have the longevity or the lifespan that they used to here. There are other fruit trees that would be a lot more productive for you and last a lot longer. But that being said, one thing that I've started doing is I've taken my citrus peel. I personally prefer to only use either homegrown or organic citrus peels, and I will dehydrate them and cut them up or break them up and put them in jars, and I add that to my tea because that is what is used in your tea from the store anyway, is usually the peels. Dotted horsement's another Florida native along with calamintha. Roselle is what is used in that red tea that's common in Jamaican and I believe African cultures, and that grows really well here. And also moringa, that is a tree that you can eat the leaves from, and it's a common ingredient in tea. Another thing that you can grow, and this is in your kitchen. So for those of you who have an apartment or a condo, or you really just don't want to go outside and garden, this is something that you can do indoors. It's actually pretty easy. You can grow microgreens or sprouts. So they're both living. So when we go to harvest those sprouts there in that picture, we're just going to snip them off at the soil level. And we're going to eat them, meaning they're going from growing to plate in a moment. Those are really nice on as a garnish. I like them a lot on baked potato with sour cream. You can put them on top of avocado toast. There's a number of different things that you can do with sprouts and microgreens. The top circular shaped picture, those are mung bean sprouts. So when you go to an Asian restaurant and there's bean sprouts, that's what those are. And they're really easy to grow. I have I got about a quart jar of mung bean seeds from the health food store. They are organic. And I've had them for a couple of years. So they're not making, there's some that are not sprouting. So get fresh seeds. Don't buy a ton like I did. That was a mistake. And you can grow sprouts in your house as well. All you need is a jar. There's no soil with sprouts. You just soak them, follow some directions. But they are really easy to grow and they're really good for you. And you can grow just a small amount for one meal. You can grow enough for a couple meals, and you're not buying more than you need. And you're not having to remember to go to the store. They're ready when you want them. They both take about 4 to 7 days to be ready. The sprouts are a little bit faster than the microgreens. So the benefit to having microgreens and sprouts in your diet is you're actually eating living food. And according to a study that was done recently, they are between 4 to 40 times more concentrated with nutrients than the full plant. So let's say you grow broccoli sprouts, you're getting more nutrition in the sprout, 4 to 40 times more nutrition in that sprout than you would if you let that plant grow up and then you ate the broccoli like we usually eat broccoli, you know, the whole floret. So that's one benefit too. And you don't have to worry about pests when you're growing these. You don't have to worry about remembering to water them and go outside. You just take care of them on your kitchen counter. And you don't even really need, for sprouts, you don't need a bright light. You can grow them in a fairly dim area. For the microgreens, you need a bright area. Some people use a growing light, some people don't. I have a south-facing window in my kitchen, so that's helpful to be able to have just a bright space to grow something like that on. But they really don't take up that much space. I like to repurpose a container for that something came in, just a shallow tray. And I don't poke holes in it because I don't want it to make a mess in my kitchen, and I'm just careful with the water. So it doesn't even need drainage. So how much might you save if you start growing this at home? So a tray of microgreens or a little clamshell full of sprouts ranges between $4 and $6 usually each. That will be maybe a week worth if you're adding this into your diet. The microgreens to grow at home, the setup and the seeds to get started, I have about 20 bucks. I went to the local health food store and I got some sprouting seeds. This is a sandwich mix. It was $5, and this has about a quarter cup of seeds in it, and this will be enough to grow sprouts or microgreens for my family for 4 weeks maybe. So that's pretty cheap. With microgreens, you do need a soil or a soilless mixture, and with sprouts you don't. It doesn't require any soil. And they're both pretty easy to grow. And one thing that I'd like to point out is when you have these at home, it's much easier to add this into your diet than remembering to go to the grocery store and making sure you eat them first, or you bought too much and they half of them went bad, or you go to the grocery store every Saturday and the meal you want to use the microgreens or the sprouts on is not going to be ready until Wednesday. So you've got that window of time. So the microgreens will last because they're actively growing, but the sprouts, I'd like to caution you about having old sprouts because they can harbor some pathogens as they start to get a little older, or if they don't have enough airflow. So do follow some directions when you're trying sprouting. Another thing that you can grow in an apartment is actually kombucha. It is growing. You're growing a SCOBY, the little white tan pancake-shaped blob that forms on top. That's actually an acronym. SCOBY is the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And to make kombucha, all you need is organic sugar, all natural black tea, and you want to make sure that is in an unbleached tea bag or loose tea. Tea bags are a little bit easier, and you need filtered water with no chlorine or fluoride in it. So you have a water filter at home, that's perfect, or you could buy some. And then you can flavor it if you want to with fruits or herbs. Kombucha is really, really, really easy to make. I am a busy mom. I work full time, and my partner also works full time, double time, and we're not home a whole lot, and or we're working from home right now, and we're super busy. So kombucha is something that you can grow, you can have and take care of once a week, maybe twice a week, and that's all you have to think about it is once or twice a week. And it just happens. You just have to make sure that you feed it every once in a while and transition the part that's done into the second fermentation if you want to flavor it. So let's talk about savings on that because this one's substantial. Do any of you buy kombucha every day? I used to. That's actually what led me to want to start making my own, was I realized how much money I was really spending on kombucha, because I'm like, it's healthy, it's good for you. Kombucha is so good for you. It's full of probiotics, and it has flavor. You know, it's something. more substantial than water. It's, you know, it's a fancy beverage. When I go out for lunch or when I want something, I like to give myself a treat for going to the grocery store because I really don't like shopping. So anyway, let's talk about savings. It's about $3 a bottle if you're buying single servings. If you're buying 3 bottles a week, that's over $450 a year. That's a lot. If you make it at home, depending on how much you make, the cost of your ingredients is going to be probably less than $100. That's a really big difference right there. And one of my absolute favorite things to do with my homemade kombucha is to try out different flavors, and that's something you can't do at the grocery store because they have the flavors there. You don't get to make them on your own. You don't get to try your own combinations. Some that I've tried are blueberry basil. I've tried making my own ginger turmeric. I've tried adding honey to some. I have made like different fruit cocktails. I've tried adding pomegranate to it and just all sorts of different combinations and different fruits and different flavors. One of my favorites is just plain mango. And star fruit, of course, I have a star fruit tree. So just anything that you have, you can add juice instead of fruit to it. You can add fresh herbs or not, and it's fun to play around with the different flavors. And then I am not a sourdough expert. I just started. A friend gave me a bit of her sourdough starter. And when I say starter, that is that bubbly substance in those jars. That is a gooey mass that's formed from natural yeast in the air, and then you feed it flour, just like regular baking flour, and water in certain amounts, and you can use it to make sourdough bread, pretzels, pizza crust, all sorts of stuff. You can use it actually in place of yeast. One of my absolute favorite things I just made, it's a miracle. I made crackers. I made homemade sourdough crackers. I was in a pinch. It was Mother's Day. I didn't want to go to the grocery store. And I'd made this dip because I thought I had crackers. But my family ate my crackers. The only ingredients in these crackers was sourdough starter, which I had because I make sourdough, and salt, and some herbs. There may have been one other ingredient, but I don't remember what it was. But it wasn't anything big. It was just such a simple recipe. I didn't have to add anything else to it, and I got the equivalent of a box of crackers, and I must say they were very fancy tasting. And it just adds a slightly different flavor, you know, like the English muffin flavor. Those are sourdough. And I really like that flavor. It's actually really, really good for you. So I didn't do a cost analysis on this one at all because I'm not an expert with this, but I have saved some money just on starting it by making crackers and crumpets. And if you don't know what a crumpet is, definitely look it up. It is a combination kind of, I think, between a pancake and an English muffin. You make it on the stovetop in a skillet, and it is so easy and so good. The first time I made them, I had them sitting on the plate, you know, turning them, flipping them, putting them on the plate to be finished. And I turn around and they're gone. I had to immediately make a second recipe because my family, my tiny family, had devoured them before the first batch was even cooled. So that's definitely something that if you're looking for a home project and you like baking, this is something that is really fun. So I have not gotten any questions from anybody. If you have questions, in the bottom there is a Q&A box. If you have any questions, go ahead and enter them. And I have some polls. I've never tried this function before. Let's see what happens. All right, if you would be so kind as to answer these couple questions. One more moment. All right, cool. I wasn't sure how many, what level of gardening we'd have coming. I've had a lot of really beginning gardeners and people without gardeners in my classes lately. So it looks like everybody has a garden. Yay. That's great. And some people need some help. So I have been putting out some classes and I'll go over those. But if you have a specific class request that you would like, go ahead and enter that into the Q&A box as well, please. So just on a final note, I really hope that you take a few minutes and figure out what ideas that you have for how you can save money in your garden, because you're working hard in your garden and it's important to try to put that garden to work for you. That's what I put it to work for me. I love to give gifts for my garden. I like to show up to potlucks with stuff for my garden. I notice that I go to potlucks and people bring drinks sometimes, but they don't often bring non-alcoholic drinks. People often show up with bottles of wine or a six-pack of beer, and then everybody shows up with their water bottles. And it's nice to have a non-alcoholic beverage. So I often bring an herbal tea, like a jug of herbal tea that I've made from my garden, because I think that having options for beverages is really important, and that's one thing that I end up drinking because I have to drive, and I don't want to be limited on what I can drink, and I want to drink something fancier than water. I want to drink something with some more flavor, and herbal tea or kombucha at a party always goes over really well. And then I use a lot of my garden goodies as gifts. So we do have a question about containers. Which plants thrive in containers? So I'm going to go back to this plant list that we had. So out of these plants that I'm suggesting, actually a lot of these will do really well in containers. Any of the smaller ones for sure, rosemary, the dotted horsemint, calamintha. Roselle is a bush, so it does well in a pot. The tulsi or holy basil, you can grow a dwarf mulberry tree in a pot. It does prefer to be in the ground, but you can, if you get it in a big enough pot and give it some love, it will grow in a pot. Yaupon holly, if you get the dwarf variety, will, or the bigger variety for a long while anyway. Ginger and turmeric, I exclusively grow those in pots because I find that when I go to dig up the rhizomes, the roots underground, I damage them with my shovel. And when I grow those in a pot, I just dump the pot out. And I don't damage any of the roots, and I can have a better harvest. And they don't go bad because I've poked them with the shovel. Lemongrass does really well in a pot. Lemongrass will grow until there's no room left in the pot, and it still doesn't care. I have not grown blue butterfly pea vine in a pot, but I imagine that it would do just fine. That picture right there is blue butterfly pea. It's not a crazy plant. It's not huge. I have heard of people growing passion vine in a pot, but I have not done that. I know some gardeners do recommend it if you're concerned about it escaping the pot. All of the mints do really well in a pot. I grow those in hanging baskets in part shade in my yard along with lemon balm. And hibiscus will do well in a pot as well. And most kitchen herbs will grow in a pot. And one thing that I'd like to point out is that there are actually different products that you can buy for containers. One of my favorites is an earth box. It is a long rectangular like window box planter. It's about 2 feet wide and 1 foot deep and a foot tall. And that has a water reservoir in the bottom. It comes with this like nutrient pack and stuff. You can buy it organic or conventional. And those are like a magic garden. So if you're looking at container gardens and you're not familiar with earth boxes, look them up. It's a brand name, the generic or the knockoff or the similar ones. I have another one that is not an earth box, but it's similar. They work just as well. So I do have some free classes, or not free, I had a free webinar tonight. There was some other classes coming up. There's a composting class on Saturday, and then 2 garden series. One's growing up gardening. These are on Wednesdays in the evening. And these are all about growing your first garden or growing a garden with young children. As I mentioned earlier, I was a former elementary school teacher, so there's one actually that is for people who are trying to do some nature learning, some school at home, and integrating that into your garden. It's actually really easy to do with some basic tips. And then a canning class, and then one of my favorites, planting a food forest on a shoestring budget. So if you're trying to grow edibles in your yard, you're trying to grow a garden, a food forest is a great option for our subtropical climate. And it's actually really, really easy to take care of. My food forest is less work than my entire yard, and it is very productive. So I hope that you can join me for some of those other classes. And registration for the Growing Up Gardening series will be up on my website tomorrow. And you can get to the step-by-step canning class on my website or through Facebook, and the composting class the same way. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you coming. And if you have any questions, or if there's some hiccups that you run into as you're trying to get started, I hope that you reach out and ask. And yeah, thank you for joining me. Good night.